Our guest this week, Sub Pop Records founder Bruce Pavitt. We've got a very special show for you folks. Let's go. Hey everybody, it's Kevin McManus, the host of A Very Special Show. Thank you so much for coming to listen to the 7th episode in the series of the first season. We are talking to Bruce Pavitt today. Bruce Pavitt, if you don't know, and you should know, founded Sub Pop Records. He's got a new project called 8-Stem out right now. You'll hear a little bit more about that later. You've heard of the bands Nirvana, Soundgarden, Mudhoney, tons and tons more. He had a lot to do with them existing. And of course the grunge music scene itself. So pretty excited that we got to speak with this legendary guy. He was wonderful to speak to. I think you'll enjoy that interview. That will be in a few moments. Please make sure you go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/very special show. Go ahead and like us on there, follow us on there, engage with our content. Keep up with what's coming next. We've got some guests coming up. We've got about 4 weeks out, and we're really excited about that. We've got a couple other projects coming up. You can take a look at what we've got going on there. Facebook.com/very special show. Of course, averyspecialshow.com is always available. It's always the best resource. Check that out as well. Like, subscribe, and follow us on all your social media platform and listening platform. And this week I want to talk about health. Of course, it's odd to talk about health during a pandemic, but I'm actually wanting to talk about mental health. And recently the CDC released some tips to, quote-unquote, be kind to your mind. It's really easy to kind of lose track of time, each other, and our mental health. And so I'm hoping that people will take these resources to heart and kind of engage with them, because I hope that we all come out of this mentally healthy, physically healthy, emotionally healthy, and together. The 5 tips are pause, breathe, notice how you feel. That's tip number 1. The second is take breaks from COVID-19 related content. I suggested last week that, or it might have been 2 weeks ago, that you allow silence into your world. So just turn everything off and just let silence kind of reign over your moment. 3 is to make time for sleep and exercise. The physical health aspect actually has a lot to do with mental health, and they kind of go deeply into that here. And then, of course, 4 is reach out and stay connected. I would suggest that Facebook probably isn't the best way to stay connected in the long run, but maybe if it's the only way we've got right now, as long as we're using it in a positive way. I'm not necessarily saying that we always have to be positive, but we need to share those tough feelings. That's a good place to share it as well, just as long as we're treating each other kindly, I guess is what I'm talking about. And of course, number 5 is seek help if you're overwhelmed or feel unsafe. Now, of course, a lot of people are going to feel unsafe in the middle of a pandemic. I mean, that's a natural feeling to have, but this is just a way to cope with stress. They've got some good ways for you to kind of deal with that stress, cope with that stress, and taking those breaks, making sure you're eating healthy, making sure you're getting that good sleep are the best ways of keeping the physical health aspect alive and working on the mental health. So I highly recommend cdc.gov/coronavirus/2019/da-da-da-da. But just go on the CDC website. They've got some really great stuff for folks to look at on there. I really love you all. I desperately, desperately wish and hope and look forward to the day that we all get to hang out again in the restaurants and bars and dance halls and theaters, of course. I would also suggest for mental health to create. You know, those times when you're turning the COVID-19 related content off, maybe you can create COVID-19 related art. It's a good way, a good release to kind of put that out there. And it's also a good way to connect. I mean, this is my art I am creating. It's kind of a version of performance art that I'm creating here. and it's my release. So pardon me as I release my creative energy upon you. All right, that's about it from me for now. I really, really, really appreciate you listening. Make sure to like, subscribe, and follow, and enjoy this episode of a very special show with our guest, Bruce Pavitt. Take it away. All right, we're here with Bruce Pavitt, the founder of Sub Pop Records. Some might say the founder of grunge music itself. How you doing today, Bruce?
I'm doing great, Kev. Thanks so much for the invite.
Absolutely. It's really great to talk to you. I'm glad you're feeling just a bit better. And we're going to go ahead and ask you a few questions. I want to actually get to know you, Bruce Pavitt, as the artist who created those industries. And why don't we just go ahead and get started?
Sounds great. Thank you.
All right. Yeah. So I'm thinking about the guy who was in Illinois before he got here to Olympia, to the Puget Sound. What was the passion that got you started? Did you grow up in a house that was full of creative kind of energy, or were you the lone creative kind of person in the household?
Well, I grew up in a rather large family. My parents met at University of Chicago, and they decided to have 6 kids. So it was a big house. I would say my parents were very educated, and my dad in particular was interested in art and theater and music and so forth. But it was a little more on the highbrow side. He'd play opera on Sundays and take us into the Art Institute and things like that. As a child, I developed a passionate love for pop music. I grew up in the 60s, and when I turned on my $5 AM radio, I'd hear the Beatles and James Brown and Motown and all sorts of great music. And I wound up spending a lot of my money as a kid and as a teenager on music because it's just very satisfying.
I kind of grew up as the lone kind of person in my household, and it's always interesting when I hear that people grew up in these households that had all this creative energy around them, and I admire that when parents take the time to bring that into their child's life. You've said that Chaos was one of the most radical radio stations in the United States, and it still remains so. Apart from bringing you here to the Pacific Northwest, what effect did Chaos Evergreen, the Olympia culture, during that time specifically have on you going forward? And is that where you gained the drive for decentralizing music production?
That definitely was a little bit more information. I started going into Wax Trax Records in Chicago, which I think is considered one of the great record stores of all time. So in 78 and 79, I was going into the city. I was reading underground zines and buying indie records and punk and alternative records there. So by the time I got to Evergreen, I was definitely inspired by the idea that a creative artist could come out from anywhere, point being Devo from Akron, the B-52s from Athens. So I was already really thinking about this. And when I arrived at Evergreen and started doing a show at Chaos, that insight was magnified by the library at Chaos. Now, as many people know, Chaos instituted a prioritization for independent releases. 80% of anything that got played on the station was supposed to be on a small independent label. And I really fell in love with that idea that people could take control over their own culture and release their own music. Of course, the music was just part of it. You had photographers and graphic artists and illustrators working with record packaging. So simply by picking up a record from a regional indie artist, you could kind of get a sense for what was going on in that town. Again, anyway, I could extrapolate on that, but Chaos had a lot to do with my passion for indie and regional music, for cultivating that interest in me. And as it's generally known by fans of Sub Pop. I did start a zine based on some of the records I was playing on my Subterranean Pop radio show, which I started in Olympia in 1979 at Chaos.
And I actually have a question about that Subterranean Pop magazine. There's a pretty famous foreword in that where you say when people buy a record, they're not only plugging into the music, but into the values and the lifestyle that are implied by the artist. And when you were selecting the bands, when you were going forward, I mean, you started with the zine, and then in 1988 on First in Virginia with Jonathan Poneman, you opened that Sub Pop Records shop there. Two questions, I guess. What was the goal, the original goal? What were you guys trying to accomplish? And also, was the process of selecting the people, the bands, the artists for the label, was there a vetting process to ensure that they match the values and the lifestyle of that vision that you kind of communicated in that Subterranean foreword? Well,
I think just broadly speaking, I and everybody involved with the Sub Pop label as it developed, my business partner John Poneman, Mark Arm from Mudhoney, Charles Peterson, who was photographing a lot of these bands, there was just an overall appreciation and love for DIY culture, and that it was very important to support your local scene. Revolutions start at home, they start in your own backyard. So even though different personalities may have different taste in music or different lifestyle choices, for example, Mr. Poneman was a vegetarian, I was not, etc. There was just an overarching passion for supporting local music, and with Seattle music in 1988, I have to say that there was also a deep respect for bands that put on great live rock and roll shows. So that was really the core inspiration for focusing on Seattle over and above the philosophical interest in supporting the scene. There was a passion for awesome live, very intense rock and roll shows. And all the early bands we played with, that was kind of the common denominator, was it blew people's minds when the people walked into the club.
So it sounds like it happened pretty naturally, and it sounds like it kind of goes along the lines of you and Jonathan's sensibility, maybe taste for music. What is that taste? I mean, it's obviously an independent music that you guys like. It's maybe a little bit harder core in the rock section. What is it that about your taste that delineates it? What is it that sets your products on the Sub Pop label apart from the big box rock shops? You know, what is the unique kind of characteristic? If you can choose one, what would be the unique characteristic of those bands that you were working with?
Well, at that time, first I'd like to state that both John and I have very broad tastes in music. But at that time, I was kind of using the Stooges' Funhouse album as kind of a template for what I wanted the label to be. And I think Jonathan, his taste, I think, leaned more to intelligent, creative, imaginative pop music like Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys. I think is his all-time favorite record.
Oh, wow.
I appreciate that too. So our tastes were a little different, but I think we were both just, again, really enamored with, let's just say, spirit,
Right.
Certainly what became known as the Seattle grunge band, it's not like they were as inventive as, let's say, the Talking Heads, a band like that, but they certainly had the spirit, I would say, of Iggy Pop and the Stooges. So that kind of formed the core aesthetic parameter in the early days.
Right. There's almost a bit of an irony in the exponential growth you guys went through in the early 90s. It kind of almost seems like there was a mission to not necessarily subvert the big music industry, but like kind of provide a complement to it. And your company became a big music production company pretty fast. Was there any resistance to that type of growth because of the taste and kind of the original kind of founding principles?
Well, that's a tricky question because you'd have to dial into at what stage of development. Certainly, for me, post Nevermind, things shifted quite a bit. The culture changed. Every indie band realized that they too could potentially become millionaires overnight. And so they changed. A lot of acts really changed the way they were thinking, and there were more demands and expectations. I found myself talking to more managers and attorneys than artists. So,
right.
I don't know if I'm really addressing the question head on, but there were changes in the culture. Certainly, bands became more business-oriented. We sold 49% of the company to Time Warner. So we maintained control of the company, but there was a lot of growth there. We did some creative things, but as the company grew, it became more departmentalized, and it became less of a good fit for me. I'm more of a holistic thinker. I started the label from scratch. I kind of like doing a little bit of everything. And as the company grew and became more departmentalized, my way of thinking it was like round peg, square hole kind of thing.
This episode of a very special show was made possible by contributions from Oli Arts. Oli Arts is the South Puget Sound's premier multi-platform arts publication. They are dedicated to highlighting the amazing arts and culture our community creates. They deliver information about performance, music, visual arts, and cultural events around the South Puget Sound via multiple mediums. Oli Arts offers a bi-monthly print edition, daily online content, occasional podcasts, and enhanced mobile experiences. Oli Arts is the guide to local arts and culture, from the drama of locally produced theater to the eclectic beauty of the Procession of the Species and semi-annual Olympia Arts Walk. Oli Arts print edition is hand-delivered by arts aficionados to local theater and concert patrons, while weekly online updates are curated and customized for local interest. For advertisers and community partners, Oli Arts provides unique access to a highly valued demographic of South Puget Sound audiences and readers. Whether you were born here or you're just visiting for the day, Oli Arts is your expert guide to arts and culture. Find free, up-to-date coverage of local events and happenings at olyarts.org. That's OLYARTS.org.
I can't see it all. Divine if I could, it would all be great. Put your picture on my wall.
And now for the feature of the week, Seattle Musical Theater. Seattle Musical Theater was founded in 1978. Actors who share their talents with the company include both seasoned professionals and those just starting out in the business. Many of the actors and artistic teams have day jobs, but their love of musical theater and the opportunity to hone their craft while being a part of a terrific production keeps them coming back to play time and time again. Like most theater companies, Seattle Musical Theater had to postpone the rest of their 2020 season. They were about to open in the Heights on April 30th, and it was to run until May 10th. There have been rumblings on social media about how the company has decided to pay the full contracts to the performers and the tech crew, and I think that that's just fantastic, and I think they deserve our support. Please visit seattlemusicaltheatre.org. Theater is spelled THEATRE.org. seattlemusicaltheatre.org/support. Give everything you can to this company that cares so much about their artists. Thanks to Seattle Musical Theater for their support of the arts and the artists. And now, back to our interview with Bruce Pavitt. I want to ask you a little bit about this new project, 8STEM. Your co-founder said that part of the reason he's involved in this particular project is that he's hopelessly obsessed with sound. You've made your bones, and you could probably easily kick back on Orcas Island in perpetuity. What is it about 8STEM that piques your interest and kind of brings you out into this second act kind of project?
Well, first and foremost, I'd like to underscore the idea that work, the best work really comes out of a sense of play, in my opinion. And if you're going to have a sense of play in creating a business, it's very important to be working with other people that you feel comfortable with and that you enjoy working with. And a lot of business people don't necessarily think that way.
Right.
But for me, it's all about the chemistry of the co-creators. And I had known Adam for quite a while on Orcas Island. I'd known him for 10 years. I've always thought he was a very intelligent, fun, and creative person. So he brought me the prototype that he had developed, which showed me that you could take a song once it's inputted properly and remix and customize it. I found it just very intriguing. So between the creative prospects of the project and the creativity and intelligence of the co-creator, I was enamored enough to drop everything I was doing and join in on the project. And we've been working on it for almost 5 years. We're very close to having this app available on Android phones. As you might know, 80% of the world's phones are Android.
Right.
It's been available on iOS for a couple years. It's been downloaded over 40,000 times from people from almost every country in the world. And that's what's really kind of fascinating about getting into the app world, is that people from distant reaches of the globe can access what you're doing immediately, and I find that really interesting.
I encourage all of my listeners to go visit 8stem.com. That's the number 8, STEM.com. On the main page, you're going to find the way to download that on iOS, like he said, and then you can put in your email, it looks like, and download it later when they have it available. On the Android network. 8STEM is a revolutionary interactive studio format that allows any listener to remix music like a professional DJ or sound engineer. Highly recommend checking that out. It's Bruce Pavitt's next project. And Bruce, what do you struggle with as a creator and as an artist?
Well, that's an interesting question. Anybody who's I do consider myself a creative person. I'm definitely a right brain personality, and right brain personalities function differently. And I'll just kind of riff on how I see that. One analogy I like to give people is that some people operate more like cats, and some people operate more like dogs. Okay,
Right.
So I am definitely a cat personality, so I'm very independent. I don't necessarily work that well in corporate settings, whereas people who feel comfortable with dogs and in hierarchy and routine, just a different personality type. So as somebody who functions more like a cat, I go in and out of how do I say this? Working with an organization can be challenging because I'm moody, I'm creative, I'm independent. The way I like to work is more project-oriented, where I can work collectively with some people on a project and move that forward. But getting locked into any kind of routine where you're going to an office 8 hours a day, that doesn't work for my personality.
And what is important to you when you're creating? Are you trying to communicate a message to an audience? Is it just the act of creating itself that kind of fulfills you? What is it that's important to you and that keeps you bringing back to creating this industries and music and everything else?
I guess it comes down to, let's just say, social chemistry. I, in a way, consider myself to be kind of a social chemist. I'm interested in scenes and what activates scenes. So with Sub Pop, for example, what really motivated me was the idea that I could bring in all sorts of creative people and introduce them to each other. So that's how I express my creativity, is working with other creative people to move the culture forward. I'm not a painter, I'm not a singer, I'm not a craftsperson, but I do think creatively, and oftentimes there's an intuitive process that just kind of calls me to bring certain people together, and that's kind of what motivates me.
Well, folks, that's Bruce Pavitt. Visit brucepavitt.com for more information, to go buy his books, to check out a little bit more about the projects he's working on. Like I said, 8STEM, number 8, STEM.com for the new project. I want to thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking to you, sir. And have a wonderful healing period, and also hopefully we eventually get to go outside. It sounds like you're enjoying Orcas Island up there, though.
Absolutely. It's beautiful and peaceful here, and I really appreciate the opportunity, Kevin. Thank you so much.
My friend Charlie is 65 years old. He's retired, and he was looking for something to do with his life. For many years, he watched as his son and his son's friends went off to theater camp each summer. And so, when summer came, Charlie decided to take an acting class. If you've ever taken an acting class or started engaging with some sort of theatrical or community art project, you know what the bug is. The bug happens when you find something that you've needed, that you've wanted, that has been a part of you your entire life, and you just didn't know it. The theater bug, as most people in theater today know, is one of the most powerful drawing experiences that you can have. When I was 7 years old, I was bitten by the theater bug, and from then on I was obsessed with everything having to do with the art and the craft of theater. So Charlie, at 65 years old, got bit. And now his every day, every waking moment is filled with finding ways to engage with the theater community, finding new ways to create. It's never too late to learn how to unleash your creative potential. Keep loving and keep creating. Thank you so much for listening to a very special show. Our guest next week, Leanie, the lead singer of the band Prom Queen. That episode will be made available Wednesday, May 27th at 7 p.m. Make sure to visit averyspecialshow.com for more information.
This has been a production of Very Special Media.